Sounds on Bulova time.
Today's guest is Roberta Naas, an award-winning veteran watch and jewelry journalist who began her career in the early 1980s and is credited as the first female watch journalist in the United States. Roberta, a 35-year veteran in the industry, she is the editor and founder of the authoritative online watch site, atimelyperspective.com, which she formed in 2010 as a serious watch blog with articles published almost daily ever since. Naas has written 6 books on watches and has contributed chapters to a host of brand and watch-specific publications, including our Bulova History of First book. Welcome, Roberta Naas. Roberta, great to have you here today. I think you were one of, if not the first woman journalist in what was really a male-dominated industry back then. Tell us, how did you end up here? And how did it all start?
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. This is really a lot of fun. Bulova and I go way back. But yeah, I mean, it's been a very interesting journey and not an easy one. I joined the watch industry in I'm going to say 1984, I joined National Jeweler magazine, which then was a big tabloid publication owned by the Gralla family. You've been in this industry a long time too, so you might recognize some of these old names.
Definitely. I think Joe Thompson may have worked around that time as well with you, or?
Joe was a couple of years. He was in the industry a couple of years more than me, longer than I. He worked for, I forget the name of the magazine, Modern Jeweler, I think.
Yes, that's it.
I worked for National. Yeah. And actually, Joe was a big help to me. So let me tell you my story. I have a master's degree in newspaper journalism, and I came out, did a couple of different magazine jobs, and I joined National Jeweler. It was, like I said, mid-'80s. And at the time, everybody worked on beats. So you would, somebody was a watch editor, somebody was a gemstone editor, the pearl editor. And I had the retail beat, which was really fascinating at the time because there were catalog showrooms and different worlds. So my good friend Norman Miller was the watch editor. And after about a year, he was leaving and he was going to the sales side. And we talked and he said, well, you should really take the watch industry. You should take the watch beat. And so we were talking about it and I'm like, I don't know, watches are boring. He said, trust me, they're not boring. So I marched into the editor's office, and the editor-in-chief at the time was a woman too, which was really unheard of. And I said, I want to be the watch editor. And she looked at me, she said, you can't. We've never had a woman watch editor in this industry before. They will never accept you. And you have to understand, this was the 80s. So the Japanese were a little bit more important than the Swiss because it was a quartz era. And her concept was the Japanese are just too male-centric and they won't accept a woman. And I said, I don't accept that answer. So I said, you give me a week and I'll prove to you that I can be accepted. So I walked out and I put together my resume, my photograph, a host of questions, and a letter that said, I'm planning to be the next watch editor of National Jeweler. And I'm hoping to come to Japan and interview the CEO of the biggies at the time, Seiko, Citizen, Casio, Orient. And I sent this letter out by fax in those days.
At least it wasn't telex.
I don't remember that part. So anyway, I sent this letter out and one by one, I started getting, yes, the CEO will meet you. Yes, the CEO will meet you. And 4 days later, I walked back into the editor with all my little faxes and I said, now I'm the watch editor and I'm going to Japan and I'm interviewing all these CEOs. And yeah, that's what I did. And she said, we're going to have to give this a trial and see how it works out. And I went to Japan. I interviewed all these CEOs. I had a magnificent experience, went with Seiko up to Matsuya and, everywhere. And I come back, I did all my great stories. And at the time, everything was very, very competitive. very news oriented. Whoever got that story first, you were the star of the day. So it was a very difficult playground to break into. And being a woman, a lot of the meetings were in men's clubs. A lot of the meetings were cigar meetings in private clubs, and I wasn't invited. And so I found that I had to really start carving my own way. I had to call all of the brand CEOs. I had to say, I need a meeting with you. I need to get in with you. We're talking the Bob Pliskins of Seiko. We're talking the Jack Davis of Longines. Andy Tisch, who owned Bulova at the time, or the Lowe's family owned Bulova. Mm-hmm. And one by one, I broke down those doors and I started meeting with them. And I learned I had to change my ways. I was young and thin and, wearing mini skirts, and that just didn't work. I had to have that really professional air. There were no women for me to have as a role model. And, but I proved myself with my journalism. I proved myself with being ethical, with making sure I didn't break any of those big secrets, making sure there were no faux pas. And the only person I really had to talk to then was Joe Thompson. Brings me full circle. And thankfully, the person that he is was so giving and gracious. And he gave me some tips and hints on how to break into that boys' club from a man's perspective. And so that's sort of my story.
Oh, that's a great story. And that leads me to, having that perspective over all of these decades now that you've been covering the industry. How do you feel that journalism has changed, that journalistic, you had mentioned just now about breaking that story. I don't feel, maybe it's just because I'm on this side of the table, but I don't feel like there's that much of that anymore. Is that true?
Yeah, it's really changed. You have to remember in the 80s, 90s, right? We didn't have the internet. We didn't have all of these digital social media platforms. That stuff didn't come around until the 21st century. Mm-hmm. So everyone relied on the news that we were putting out on newsletters and in print. And it was very competitive. You had to be, I guess, territorial. You had to lay claim to your space. So most of us from that era, including Joe, still have that mentality that, we want to help. I mean, we've all evolved, but it's that I carved this and I want to show you the ropes now, but it's changed. It's definitely changed. As soon as we got all of this social media, all of the digital platforms, all of the immediacy, I think journalism became more of a way to tell the story differently. Mm-hmm. And so it's competitive. And out there in the real broadcast world, it's certainly competitive, but within our little microcosm of watches, mm-hmm. We still all want to get our story out, but we all know that we're all telling the same story. So it really has to be, how do you tell it? What do you bring to the table that's different? How do you show someone a world they don't understand, they don't know, they've never been behind the scenes? So it's a different kind of storytelling. It's a different narrative than it was 25, 30 years ago, 35 years that I've been in the industry. Did that answer your question?
It does. And actually it leads me to open up the subject of atimelyperspective.com. I guess that's your version of really evolving from being a traditional print journalist to taking that digital space, right? So talk to us a little bit about A Timely Perspective. What made you start it, and how do you approach that project?
So that's interesting that you asked that question, because I started it, it's been 11 years ago now. And at the time, we were watching things move from print to digital. And Ben at Hodinkee had pretty much just started his site a few years earlier. And we became very good friends. And I remember when I was going to start my site, I went to him and I said, hey, look, I'm not trying to step on your toes, but I really feel there's a room for a woman's voice. And I also felt that as more and more publications were emerging, the world of print was becoming smaller. And so I needed to find an outlet where I could publish all the articles I wanted to publish that I couldn't sell to different publications. I've been a freelancer. I've been in the industry 35 years. I've been a freelancer for 25 years. So probably first woman to actually break out in that whole freelance realm, back then in the watch world, but that's a different story. But anyway, so to answer your question, I decided that I would start a timely perspective. At the same time, I also launched a women's blog called Watch Seduction. But I quickly realized it's very different. Watch Seduction still lives, but it's too hard to handle all that. So my goal was to create a watch site that was informative, that was regular. I mean, I published thousands of stories. I publish almost every single day on the site. Sometimes it's just product news. Sometimes it's CEO interviews or celebrity interviews. Sometimes it's my view on the world and my opinion about, the industry or the shows but it is a serious blog, and I do publish every day. I do have some freelancers who work for me, and I feel that it's still a niche site. It's not got the readers that Ben has, or half of the other blogs have. I maybe 25,000, but my readers email me. They ask me my opinions. They ask me what watch they should buy. So it's a nice interactive platform. But it was interesting when I started it, because I think, again, I probably was the first one to start a watch blog as a female. Elizabeth Dewar started hers with Quill and Pad a few years later. Yeah. But it was just, you have to evolve, right? All the time. You have to be on top. I'm already thinking about, I've written 6 books on watches. Do I want to write a 7th? I'm talking to some publishers, but maybe I don't write a book. Maybe it's something different. I don't know, but there's a next step.
To follow up on that a bit is from the brand side, what have you seen in terms of evolution? I mean, already probably several generational management changes of what you've seen from the brand side. How do you see things evolving today versus maybe back in the mid 80s in terms of brands?
Well, obviously, there's been that shift. We've lost, my day, Universal Genève was in business. I mean, we've lost over the different challenging years of the Quartz era and the economic situations. We've lost a lot of brands. So there's been a reduction. There's also been that, that buyout, Bulova being owned by Citizen. Wouldn't have even thought of that decades ago.
That's true. I used to say it with a Hatfield and the McCoys.
Right. So we've watched this whole matriculation of brands, and what I'm seeing in the last, I'd say, the 21st century, brands are becoming smarter. They're becoming more savvy. Of course, we have all the tools. We have Facebook we didn't have. We have, all the spaces we didn't have before. And I think as the brands are utilizing that more, they're evolving. I mean, you look at Bulova. I don't know. You've always been a first. I want to go back to that history of first. You've always been a first. You've always been a leader. You've involved in music with Frank Sinatra in the days, and, space and diving, everything. But I think the last 20 years, the world has become a much smaller place for everyone. So there's room to break into newer realms, newer areas. And I think the brands now are at a crossroads where they have to really think about how they're marketing, who they're marketing to, what's the right mix of product. You've done an amazing job with the archive series. Because it's a gap between recalling the history and positioning it for today and for the future. And we know all the watch lovers out there are looking for those replicas and those. I have my I'm getting off topic, but I have my Devil Diver with me.
Oh, nice. That's definitely one of our favorites here.
Yeah, it's a great watch. And I think it really put Bulova on the map for the collectors. So I guess the brands, I think the brands, as I said, they're at a crossroads. They need to address today's topics in meaningful and relevant ways for today's consumers.
One of the things that I've noticed that's probably has changed or is changing is there were characters in this business when I first got in, maybe because I was young, the characters seemed a little bit larger than life sometimes, but, I was fortunate enough to work for the Swatch Group, and Mr. Hayek, and then certainly other folks, that were there, like Jean-Claude Biver or, Walter von Kennel, who I know, very well. How do you see, I guess this is going to be a two-part question. Who was your most interesting interview, or who would you always say, oh, I'm going to get to interview X. It's going to be an interesting day. It's going to be an interesting interview. And who do you miss, in terms of that, in terms of having those maybe couple of year chats with?
That's a tough question. You can ask me about the celebrity.
Come on, Roberta. It's not going to be a layup here.
I think you're right. There are some amazing characters. Bob Pliskin. You never knew what you were going to get. Never. Yeah, there were. Let me go to part one question. I think that there are still some characters out there today that I enjoy talking with, that I know I'm going to get an outside of the box answer. Quite honestly, there are also some CEOs and executives that I avoid interviewing because it's like pulling teeth to get them to talk outside of the corporate DNA structure.
So you just get corporate speak. You're just going to get a company line, and you're not going to get to some real juice.
And I mean, we all need that, but you need to, especially when you're writing for, Forbes or Bloomberg or some of the business publications I write for, we need creative thinking. It's what's driving the world now. So yeah, I mean, I enjoy interviewing Max Busser. I think all of the independents think differently just by nature of what they do.
They're entrepreneurs, so they come at it from a different point of view.
Yeah. So I do think that there are some great people out there that I enjoy interviewing, that I look forward to interviewing. Jean-Claude Biver, I've known him. He and I grew up in this world together. When I started in Basel World in the early 80s, he was launching Blanc Pen. And I'll never forget him and his speeches. And we will never make a quartz watch. He's so inspiring, and he's so brave, and he's so unique. So he will always be someone I will always look forward to talking to. I thank him for the cheese every Christmas time. He's just a character. So I feel like he has always been instrumental and important, and I think he continues to be, even though he's, semi-retired. I think there are some up and coming executives that I enjoy talking with. And then I really enjoy the celebrity interviews I do, because they bring a different perspective to what time means to them.
So this is a collector series that runs on YouTube. And for folks who may not be aware, you get to do a lot of traveling. Pre-COVID certainly, and we hope that that's going to start up again soon. And you get to interview all these great folks that you're describing. What's the most interesting location that you went over the years? And I know you've been to a lot of places, so that's really asking a crazy question of you.
It is. But there are some memorable locations, and you're right. The last 14 months have been tough, but I have my first business trip next week. So June, July, I have 3 or 4 business trips this summer. So it's starting again.
That's great.
I went to the Great Wall of China. I went to China, and where we stayed, we had the opportunity to really walk the Great Wall of China and, really get a historical perspective on what it meant. I found that to be fascinating. Being in the Arabian desert with Lange and Son brought us on a sort of an around the world trip. South America. I mean, again, it's sort of like the gems I get from interviewing celebrities. I've been so many wonderful places that I wouldn't have if it weren't for being in this world. I've also had wonderful experience. I mean, I had the opportunity to catapult off of and trap land onto the USS Ronald Reagan in the Pacific. Who gets to say this, So I've been very blessed. I walked into an industry that I said, oh, this is going to be boring. And it became a lifeblood for me. And you talk about this being a collector series. I mean, my passion for this industry really stemmed from my love of writing and from the people, the characters. The people brought this industry and surrounded me and enveloped me. And that's where my passion came from. Now, do I own dozens upon dozens of watches? Yes. Do I love every one? Yes. I wish there were more days in a year for me to wear them all. But
so you have more than 365 watches, I guess, in the collection.
Well, don't forget, I have some really unusual watches too. I have the first Tissot rock watch ever made.
Oh, yes, I remember that watch when it first came out.
I even have some vintage pieces, this tiny little Bulova from the 50s that we tried to get running again and can't. But yeah, I don't wear that often because it doesn't work and it's tiny.
Well, we'll have to get that watch from you. We'll have to get that watch from you. We'll see. We have a, so I don't know if you remember, but we're involved in a partnership with the Veterans Watchmaker Initiative down in Odessa, Delaware. Actually, I just came from there on Friday last week for their graduation. They graduated three watchmakers from the class of 9, and they're doing a lot of work to expand the school. But Sam Cannon, who's the founder of the school, is an unbelievable watchmaker. So I'm sure if I get him that Bulova watch, we'll be able to hopefully get that fixed for you. So I definitely want to make sure that watch makes one of the 365 days in the year.
Bulova has a great history with the Bulova school. I mean, it was still running when I toured it when I was in the industry. I mean, so, you just have so much great involvement. I really love the brand. I love what you did this year with the with COVID and with the New York,
Proud New Yorkers.
Yes, naming the Proud New Yorkers and the businesses and people who make the city what it is. So, I mean, it's just, you're one of the brands that checks all the boxes when it comes to talking to today's women and men and, addressing the LGBTQ market. And, you're just right there with the conversations that matter. So I think that's really important. I got off topic.
No, thank you, Roberta. It's very nice of you, but it's also really, it's what the brand is. I mean, as I've said on other these episodes, no one needs a watch today. I mean, from a utilitarian standpoint. So what the brands have to offer is their storytelling and their view on life as told through the eyes of a timepiece, almost in a way. And that may sound corny, but the connections with the consumer, with the story time, with the storytelling, but the connections with the watch, right? And watches are very personable items. They sit on your wrist. I mean, very few things are so personable as a watch or a piece of jewelry, whether it's an heirloom or whether you buy it new. So thank you for saying that. And it's definitely something that we work on here every day. So you have the great fortune of writing for consumers, consumer publications. You probably hear from consumers from time to time, whether on your a timely perspective, or maybe they're emailing you off of an article that you wrote. What are they looking for today? What are consumers looking for from watch brands in your dealings with them?
Authenticity. I think transparency. Um, I think consumers today want, of course, they want great product. Of course, they want great value, but they want brands to care about the same things they care about. We have younger generations now, right? We've got, the Gen Zers coming up, and they care about sustainability, and they care about sourcing and, the environment. These are all things that matter to them. And so I don't know that they would run out and buy a watch that was built destroying, a country or an area of a country. I feel that they're looking for brands to make the connection between their past, the brand's past, and their rich archives, and the customer today. And I think it's a package, and it's the product that resonates with them, and it's the story and the message that resonates with them. And I think it has to come down to being real and being genuine. Certain brands at the super high end luxury level, they'll always have their collector following, but even they have to reach further to keep the next generations involved. So yeah, I think it's a whole package that brands need to put out there.
So I guess it was 8 years ago-ish that Apple, right, introduced their first version watch. And I remember at that time I was at Gucci watches and jewelry, and everybody was proclaiming the end of the world for analog watches. We've had including our sister brand, also makes connected watches. So it's a very big business. It's a big world. But something funny happened along the way. We sell more automatic watches today at Bulova than we probably did 10 years ago. And growing. I'd say probably will be at 40-50% of the collection soon. But what do you attribute this to? I mean, shouldn't we all just have been wearing our Apple or connected other smart watches and been done with this?
I'm really impressed with those numbers because I remember when you brought out the classical mechanic watches back, years ago, and you offer something that only brands in a very small space can offer, and that is quality and affordability. And I think as people are looking to understand the watch industry more and get their foot in the door, people being consumers and collectors, they do want that automatic watch. They do want a mechanical timepiece, whether it's self-wind or manual wind. I think they want that because it connects them to a past. Whether it wasn't their past, maybe it was someone in their family's past, maybe it has nothing to do with anything other than it's a genuine watch. The Apple Watch and all of the connected watches, and the hybrids that your sister brand makes, they're a necessary evil, but they're also a plus, because I think, all those people who are wearing them because they want to check their golf game, they want to check their steps, then they don't want to carry their clunky phone around. Yeah, they serve a purpose, but it also serves another purpose. And that is, I don't want this connected watch on my wrist anymore. I don't want to be that connected. I've gotten used to wearing a watch, and I want a watch that I can wear that tells the time and maybe other cool functions, especially in today's active lifestyles. So I think people are going out and they're using it. It's a stepping stone. And I think watch brands are actually, it was a boon for them. It wasn't the next Quartz era. It was a boost, because as people moved on from being connected, they've gotten used to something on their wrists. And then I think that's where going back to mechanical watches comes into play. So it's sort of two questions there, two answers there.
where would you like to see the watch business go now as we move into the future? What from your point of view?
I keep wondering what is the next step. I do. I think we've made a transition where we have to be more personal. We being the watch industry, the watch brands, we have to tell those better stories, but we've made this great vintage connection. What is the next step? You know, it's a question. It's just like in publishing on my side of the fence. What is the next step? Where do we go? There has to be some new level. I don't know. You tell me what you think it is.
I think there's still more room to be done in looking back for certain brands. I think I had someone ask me, a journalist asked me a few months ago about why were we doing the archive series, and what was the energy behind that and why. And I mentioned to the person that it was twofold. One, it's our responsibility, our brand fiduciary responsibility, to make sure that people are aware of those great watches and great history that a brand like Bulova, and there's certainly other brands that have the same, that people are aware of it, because there's a whole generation, like we're speaking of, there's 33-year-olds and 21-year-olds, and they don't know about any of this, and they certainly want to know and would like to know. So I think there's more work to be done there, for sure. But we're also, I can only speak for our group and the entire group, all the brands that are under the Citizen Watch Holdings group. We're looking forward, looking at new technology. And I know maybe that's not something that all brands maybe have the ability to do or may be doing, but something like the Accutron electrostatic movement that we introduced last year, that's the first movement ever to be powered by electrostatic energy. And so that's looking forward, right? And Accutron, we had our 60th anniversary last year, but it wasn't about only being in the past. We were also introducing, a brand new movement and a brand new concept. So I'm excited for, other watch brands and companies to come up with new technology as well, because there's certainly going to be, I think, room for that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that electrostatic movement, that's revolutionary. And it's hard today to be revolutionary. So I think as more brands explore technology, as more brands explore new materials, make their own, try to figure out what they can use for the outside of the watch and for the inside of the watch, I do think that is the next wave. I think you're right there. And I love the Accutron watch. I wore it for a while. I reviewed it. It was just a spectacular piece. And it's got sex appeal to it. It's not just another watch. And again, it goes back to the history of first that Bulova has been touting. It's like you make the connection from the past, but you also look to the future. And that watch was a first, and it was a first in the 21st century, which was the chapter I wrote for you.
Yes.
Yeah, but no,
that book's already going to be 6 years old soon. I can't believe it. It's crazy. So Roberta, it's been fantastic to chat with you. I really appreciate your time. I do want to touch on a few things before we say goodbye. And that is, again, you write every day, as you said, maybe sometimes even more than once, on atimelyperspective.com. So we definitely want to invite viewers of the show to check you out there. Share with us also, you're doing a lot of different publications. I believe Forbes Digital or Forbes.com. You write a column there. Is that right?
I do. I have a perfect timing column on Forbes. I also have contributed to Forbes Print. I write for Elite Traveler. I'm currently writing a chapter in a book for another brand. So I keep busy.
That's great. I really appreciate your time, Roberta. You've been, certainly a pioneer and a great friend to the industry. And I look forward to reading a lot more of your work in the coming months and years.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun. It's always good to talk to you. Next time it'll be in person.
Yes, couture maybe. Maybe we'll see each other in Las Vegas.
Yep, I'll be there. All right. Thank you.